Now that the government have declared that teachers will get a 5% pay rise in September, I've been asked a number of times what effect this will have on their final salary pensions. So the obvious thought that getting a pay rise when we're talking about the final salary pension is that any pay rise must be good for your pension because the final salary is going up. Unfortunately, those obvious and intuitive thoughts on this can be wrong. Well, not wrong as such. If your pay goes up, then yes, the pension goes up as well. But, and this is the key, it doesn't go up by as much as it could. Taking a break before you get a pay rise can actually result in the final salary that is used for the pension calculation going up by more than the pay rise. And this is because of the way inflation is added to older salaries. If you have a break from the scheme, then your salary at the time of the break is used, but it gets inflation added to it. If inflation is more than the pay rise, then your older salary will give you more pension than the pay rise will. Now that seems very strange, and I bet many of you can't shake the feeling that if your salary in August is 40,000, for example, and then in September it goes up and it's 42,000, that waiting until it goes up must be better for your pension. So let me take you through why that isn't actually necessarily the case. Now I'm only talking about those who are at the top of the pay scale, that is those who are not going up a scale point, not adding a TLR, not moving into leadership or up a head teacher scale or into a new post that's paying a different scale. So I'm looking at those of you who are on M6 this year and you're going to be on M6 next year, or you're on the upper pay scale 3 and you're going to be on the upper pay scale 3, the lane leadership scale, or you've reached the top of your range for your leadership in your school, then this is for you. Everyone else, it might be. You will need to look at your exact figures, and I suggest you look at my other video called The Pay Plateau that explains how you can make the most from your recent promotion or your recent step up the scale. So let me take you through that increase in September and why it isn't actually the best option. Because the pay rise is a percentage of a wage, the actual amount of money you are paid is not important, just so long as you're on the same scale and the same TLR, etc. However, I will work with some numbers as examples. So let's start with a current wage of, say, 40,000 a year. Once we get the 5% pay rise, that will increase in September to 42,000 a year. Now, of course, 42,000 is more than 40,000, but it's not the figure we're used in working out our final salary, and let me explain why. The final salary uses two methods to work out that figure. One of the methods is called Method A and is the total of your salary from the last 12 months. So by the end of August, the last 12 months were all paid at that annual salary figure of 40,000. We have 12 months, all of which are 40,000. Your final salary, Method A, is 40,000. So that means on 31st of August, that's what it is. So what happens when you get that 5% pay rise in September? Well, we get a September figure that's based on a 42,000 annual salary. Well, that means that the last 12 months no longer include that September from 2021 and now include that month from September 2022. So the 12 months will now be 11 months of a 40,000 salary and just 1 month of a 42,000 salary. And so using the most recent 12 months now gives you a final salary of just over 40,000, only just over 40,000. You see, the pay rise hasn't kicked in full yet. So the question becomes, how long is it before your new final salary becomes that 42,000? How long is it before you get the full benefit of the 5% pay rise? Well, that's easy. It takes a full 12 months of being paid that higher rate before it actually becomes your final salary. That is, we have to get through to August 2023. So until then, you've got one of the months or some of the months from the 40,000 being used in the calculation. So it's a whole year before your pension gets to benefit from the pay rise that you're getting this September. But many people still look at this and think to themselves, okay, but 42,000 is still better than 40,000 I had previously, so it must still be better. And I understand why they think this. I mean, after all, I was a math teacher for many years and I know that 42 is bigger than 40. But what we haven't taken into account yet is that if we take a break from the scheme, it creates a point in time from which the pension figure will be increased not by pay, but by inflation. So if you opt out of the teacher's pension for the month of September, your final salary on the 1st of September 2022 is 40,000. And inflation then starts being added to the calculation from that date. Now, inflation figures are based on the rate in September, and we're expecting that to be in 2022 to be around 10%. Now, I'm going to go slightly less and say 9%. That means we start at the end of August with a final salary figure of 40,000, as I'll show you in the table here. By the end of September, we add on 1 month's worth of inflation, 1 month being 1/12 of the 9% or 0.75%, and that gives us 40,300. So our final salary is climbing, but how is it climbing compared to the actual final salary if we hadn't opted out? Well, in September, remember that's 11 months of 40 and 1 month of 42? 40,166. So the result is at the end of the September, opting out, if inflation is 9%, gives us a better final salary than if we'd stayed in and used the 5% pay rise. Now, as we move on to October, inflation adds another month, whereas the pay rise is getting a little bit more, but we're starting to move ahead. The value of the final salary with inflation added is pulling ahead, and it's pulling ahead every month until the point we get to August 2023, by which time the pay rise has risen your final salary, if you'd stayed in the scheme, to 42,000 to match your actual pay. Your old pay, with inflation being added to it, is over £1,500 more. Now, this is around 4% more than the pay rise has given. And that should be of no surprise. I mean, after all, a pay rise of 5% is 4% less than the inflation figure I have used. So, if there is an inflation, is there an inflation figure that makes opting out pointless? Well, yes. If inflation is less than the pay rise, then there's no advantage to doing this. And the greater the difference between inflation and the pay rise, the greater the advantage of doing this becomes. So does this mean everyone should opt out of the TPS this September? The answer to that is definitely no. But that's because it depends on your salary profile, your employment history, as well as what might lay in your future. Now, I've already said, if you're moving up the pay scales, crossing the threshold, taking on a new TLR, then your pay could well be increasing by more than inflation because of the step up, not because of the pay rise, but because you're stepping up to a new pay level. And if this applies to you, I really recommend that you take a look at the video called The Pay Plateau. The next group is those who started teaching after the introduction of the Career Average Scheme. That is in April 2015, because this only affects those who have service in the final salary schemes. And then we have groups for whom it may not be needed. Those teachers whose method B, that is the best 3 out of the last 10 years, is already better than their method A. But this group should check carefully what their best 3 years are. We don't want those years falling off their calculations, and if they're more than 10 years old or going to become more than 10 years old, and so taking a break can prevent that happening too. Then we have the most difficult group to work out, whether a break would be a benefit or not. And it's those teachers who have already had a break in pensionable service. This group is the hardest to nail down because the pension statements provided by the TPS do not show the value of such breaks. And so it takes a manual calculation to work out what is in their best interests. If that applies to you and you want to know more, please do get in touch and I can help you with those calculations.